to use a term from skiing. So if it all goes downhill, I've already said my mea culpas. But just to liven things up, I thought I would start with a little nugget of historical information about a very forgotten champion of sustainability and innovation. And if any of you have heard of him, I will, as they say in India, do Shashtang Pranam to you. And if you ever go to Mexico City, in the Mexican parliament, there's a very large mural by the artist Diego Rivera. And the mural has this man seated at a table with a family around him with a lot of food. He is the patriarch feeding the family. And that mural commemorates this man who set up Mexico's most famous and leading agricultural research institute and developed these ultra-robust, sustainable varieties of food grain that ultimately gave food security to Mexico. You might be wondering why I'm talking about a random Mexican mural, but actually that man was the Indian revolutionary Pandurangan Kankoji, who was stirring up revolution against the British in the 1920s, escaped India, found his way to Mexico, ended up setting up this research institution and creating, essentially making Mexico both self-sufficient in food and creating sustainable varieties of food grain. And that is very much part of the Indian legacy, that outlook towards sustainability, towards food security, and towards the wider world is very much part of the Indian legacy and part of the legacy that I hope we will embody in the future. So a brief overview of our speakers. We have Shri Balmuruganji, who is the Joint Secretary of the Department for Internal Trade and Industry. He is a visionary key to shaping government policies for sustainable industrial growth in India. We have Pranav Kothari, who is the CEO of Educational Initiatives. Pranav is an innovator in new age pedagogies and educational technology. We have Dr. Arunabha Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is the CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Dr. Ghosh is an extremely esteemed policy analyst and a leader in energy, environment and water research. We have Zubeda Bai, the CEO of Grameen Foundation. She's a champion of social entrepreneurship and women's empowerment. We are very lucky to have her. She has multiple panels to go to, so we're very lucky to have her with us. And we have Hakon Leknes, have I got that correctly? The director of Montel Group. Hakon is a specialist in global renewable energy markets. And last we have Yashraj Akashi, who will be joining us to give us his insight. So, sustainable jobs for a sustainable future. We have an evolving landscape of sustainable job creation in India, which encompasses policy initiatives, educational reform, technological advancements, social entrepreneurship. But there are also challenges, and the challenges are not just climate change or potentially climate breakdown, but also the evolving regulatory normative regimes that are being currently shaped, the geopolitical tensions that are feeding into shaping those regimes, and of course the looming challenges of artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, and how they affect jobs and job creation. So we have a lot to talk about, and we have extremely distinguished panelists who can provide us with the multifaceted view on how India can navigate these challenges and capitalize on the opportunities they represent. So first off, I will throw a question to the entirety of the panel, which is, where do you see the next wave of sustainable jobs coming up in India? And how do you see them being created? And I'll go first to Shri Balmuruganji.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and very important topic. Quickly, to answer your question, the next wave where the sustainable jobs are coming up. Uh, Energy transition is where the potential lies. Of course, there are so many other areas like agriculture. Uh, in agriculture, you have agri processing, so many other aspects. But in energy transition, you have huge potential. Since for India, I can say we have a commitment. We have our own commitment of reaching 40% of renewable energy by 2030, and then we have missions to achieve that. So where you have huge potential to create millions of jobs uh, in achieving that target. When we say renewable energy, we have very high on solar energy, so we have millions of jobs opportunities in solar energy and then also wind energy. And the new areas like hydrogen mission, which is coming up, green hydrogen, we have a hydrogen mission. There also you have a lot of possibilities. And why I would like to give one example how you can create jobs uh, addressing all the issues like inclusivity, sustainability. For example, in solar, I personally have experience of, got the opportunity to do that. Um, we started with, I'll just take this in as example, that will give you the context also and understanding overall. Um, I was handling a self-help group program. So IIT Mumbai and then Government of India through MNRE came out with a simple program assembling solar lamps for school kids. So it was a big program, and I remember we were given with 11 lakh units and then 1.1 million units, and then it became when women, SHG women started doing, their job is to only assemble. They got trained by IIT Mumbai technical team, and then they need to just assemble and then distribute. They started doing it and they became expert. Okay, once you do the assembling and the distribution, there are problems related to maintenance. There are repair and maintenance. So we got trained them for repair and maintenance. Some of them became expert. And then why can't we start solar enterprises around that? So then some of them got trained to start enterprises. So we started, and then there are more than 500 solar enterprises started using that initiative. And then, okay, these 500 women are doing something related to solar. Why can't we establish a producer company to address their aggregation demand and then all other technical needs? So this is how actually organically you have a lot of potential to create sustainable jobs, which not only can address issues related to climate change and also address issues related to inclusivity, and then address um, uh, this again you have in solar. Again I'm reiterating, we always did lot of work. What we used to do is solar street lights. So we used to scheme fund. We used to use some scheme to put up so many solar lamps. After 2 years, all solar lamps used to become defunct. What is the problem? There is no one to do the repair and maintenance, though you have a AMC, because you don't have people going to the rural area. So when you do this, you train local people. You train them, capacitate them, and this repair and maintenance aspect is also taken care of. So this is one example how this can be done, and then Government of India is actually doing it. I stop here, and I'll be happy to take more questions later. Thank you.
So if I can just have a follow-up question, sir, which is, how then do you think government policies can be more effectively aligned with the creation of sustainable jobs, as it is an agenda that is a priority agenda for the government of India? How do you think we can be more effective at prioritizing it, at aligning government policies with this agenda?
So, of course, when government is doing, they are formulating new policies, and also making required changes. For example, sustainable job is one requirement, and then there's a demand, and then in skilling area, for example, in skilling, what we have done, we have created a separate skills council for green jobs. So that is one example I would like to say give. And Ministry of Renewable Energy is bringing out with a lot of policies to promote um, energy efficiency. Again, there also you need the new policies, and then new policies are being brought in, and then this particular aspect of not in contradiction with existing policies, that is being taken by care by government, because this became a priority for government, because it's you can't afford to wait and watch anymore, because we are seeing and that day also I was saying, personally I have experience of since I worked in Bihar for almost, it's a small state in India. I would say it's a big state in terms of population in India, not a small state. In terms, so where Bihar is known for its water, and you have water everywhere. And a few years before, when in where you always get water in few feet, water table has gone down very badly. Then government came out with a policy called Jal Jeevan Haryali Mission. Water, trees, that is greenery, and then life. It's a separate mission came. Again, it's a policy initiative. And that was encompassing all these aspects related to sustainability, creating jobs, and also in tune with what was existing. Thank you.
So, talking about skilling, Pranav, if I now go to you, first, how do you, of course, there's the general question, as India progresses, where do you see these sustainable jobs coming from? But equally, how do we prepare the generations that are to come for these jobs, to give them the requisite skills, not just for jobs in the sustainability sector, but also for jobs that themselves remain sustainable or ongoing in the face of challenges like automation, etc.
I don't think there's anything called sustainable jobs. I don't think sustainable jobs will be coming from anywhere. I think it's about the people, how can they keep reinventing themselves to have a sustainable income, right? So everybody's sitting here. None of us were taught how to use a computer or WhatsApp or generative AI, but because we are able to learn to do it, we're retaining our income streams, right? So I don't think any sector can guarantee a job for anything. So I think to do that, would have to start in today's grade 1. So that 20 years later, this child is on the pathway for earning 60 years of income is the way I see it. Today, unfortunately, in the Indian context, the education system is very rote-based. Most of us who studied in India spent 90% of our time memorizing facts, figures, procedures, definitions to regurgitate on an exam and forget it the next day. That skill will not help us get to sustainable jobs. So unless the Indian board exams and the tests actually check for conceptual clarity, the energy that is spent and the money that is spent in preparing for tests will not be diverted towards understanding. So India takes education very seriously, right? The government spends $100 billion on education a year. The private, which means tuition, schools, spends another $100 billion a year. This $200 billion with, I would say, tiger moms, and sort of after school tuition starting as early as age 5 is all spent on memorizing. And that's not a 21st century skill, which is why there are only 10 million people in India who have an annual tax filing of more than $20,000, right? So that's how small this is for a country of $1.3 billion. So unless the education system today focuses on conceptual clarity, logical reasoning, scientific inquiry mindset, and does this both as part of the curriculum but also as part of the assessments, because everybody is trying to maximize marks on a test. Maximizing marks on a good test is not a bad thing. That's what a country like Finland has actually done well by being on top of PISA. But maximizing marks on a bad test is a really, really bad thing, which is where India today is, and India stood second last on the PISA, right? So we need to have better exams that check for better questions, better projects. That will then have a reverse effect on how teachers teach and how students will learn. When that happens, people will become independent by the age of 20 to do meaningful work that someone values to pay them. And I think that's definition of entrepreneurship, right? So whether you are on someone's payroll or whether you're generating value in an independent capacity to sort of earn money, that's what you want is a sustainable income to live a decent life. So I see a lot of this percolating down to the school system, and this is something that most people in the government, and with full respect to IS officers who work very hard, are not able to focus on the long term. They are caught up in the short term to sort of generate quick employment, because that's the urgent problem. Whereas what I'm saying, issue. And so how can we do both urgent and important? And I think what I'm proposing actually costs nothing, because changing the board exam, changing the assessments costs virtually zero. You retain the same paper, the same logistics, the same everything, but what you change is what you're asking in the exam. And that itself is a very high return on investment for India's sustainability towards growth.
So, and this is, quite a personal question. I'm on the curricular advisory group set up by the Ministry of Education in India to reform and rejig curriculums. And one of the pressures we face, of course, is that one of the things the government wants to do is to have a new focus on skills that were not really captured by traditional education, so vocational skills particularly. Where do you see those sorts of quite hard skills, but something not captured by traditional STEM education? How do you see those fitting in your scheme?
Yeah, so quickly on curriculum, right? See, even in the same city, you can have a really bad IB school and a really good state vernacular language school, right? So the curriculum by itself doesn't do much. It's kind of like a knife. In the hands of a surgeon can save life, in the hands of a robber can kill someone. So you can define the curriculum, and we can quickly come to an agreement on what those skills are, and this can keep changing every 5 years. And the skills of the future today, as they say, is collaborative problem solving as the number one thing, critical thinking. I mean, these are things that everybody knows. So how can we have a fluid curriculum? But I think far more important is how will you assess whether you're making progress on that or not, right? So a test like a TIMSS or a PISA assesses on those domains, and that's why the countries like UAE, for example, where we've worked for 15 years, we have seen UAE go from rank 50 to rank 10 just because of the emphasis on third-party independent assessment on these 21st century skills. So we can come quickly to agreement on what today is a relevant form of curriculum, but how do we keep it ever changing, ever evolving? How do we put in place high-stakes measurements to make sure we're making progress on that? Otherwise, as India tends to have a lot of good policy documents that don't really have a trickle-down effect on the system changing.
Right. So if I now go to Dr. Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh, again, as as India progresses, as India develops, where do you see the next wave of sustainable jobs coming from? And also, what do you think? Actually, I'll ask the follow-up question after that.
Okay, that's like.
So that is quite broad.
Yeah, so that's like sitting for an exam and not seeing the entire question paper right up front.
So it depends on what you say.
I hope this is working. Good morning. Thank you for having me on this panel. I think we've already heard some very interesting insights of where the next waves could come from, whether it is from the government representative, that how do you empower communities right at the grassroots level, or what was just being described in terms of curriculum reform. But I want to pitch this in two different ways. The first is the supply side focus, and I know saying this already, I'm probably digging myself a big ditch, but it is important to understand that there are new sectors that are driving the economy that will also then drive jobs. If you look at renewable energy, in 2010, India had less than 20 megawatts of solar. It now has 185,000 megawatts of non-fossil electricity capacity. It's the world's fourth largest renewables market. My organization, CEW, collaborates with the Skills Council of Green Jobs to actually count the green jobs. Just between 2021 and 2022, the number of additional jobs that were added for solar and wind was 8x. We estimate that by the end of the decade, we will have about a 1 million workforce in solar and wind. But that will create what is called about full-time equivalent employment of about 3.7 million. But that's not the only growth driver. We're going to have other sectors that will drive sustainability. So when we look at what the Skills Council of Green Jobs estimates, we're looking at about 65 million jobs coming out of sectors like water and waste management, green construction, renewable energy, green transport, and so forth. 30% of these are actually in water and waste management, not just in renewables build out. So one storyline here is that as the growth drivers of the economy become the sustainable sectors, the jobs that get derived from it, whether they sustain or not, as was being said earlier, is a different question, is going to be a driver. But I have a second way in which I want to pitch how we could create jobs. And that is this. I believe if you just walk down this promenade, even if you're selling pancakes, you'll probably have AI written after that. Right? And you'll actually sell more pancakes. If it's a pancakes.ai, you'll sell more pancakes. But the jokes aside, what I'm trying to say here is the future will certainly be more digitalized. And the future must be more decarbonized. But will the future be more decentralized? And here's the proposition. Solar jobs are more than coal jobs, or gas-based jobs. Gas-based jobs are more than coal jobs. But a rooftop solar installation creates 7 times more jobs than a utility-scale solar installation per unit of electricity produced. Why? For many of the reasons that was just being described. There's just not just the installation, it is the maintenance, monitoring, etc., especially in far-flung areas and so forth. We estimate that to power livelihoods, distributed energy to power livelihoods in rural India alone is a $50 billion market with a potential to create another 37 million livelihoods. And there's a difference between jobs and livelihoods. The sustainability comes from being empowered enough to control your own destiny. So if we now combine the digital revolution, which allows us to imagine very different markets for electrons, for a water droplet, which is not a centralized system, someone's generating the power, someone's processing the water, and someone else is using it, but a very different physical infrastructure combined with a digital infrastructure, you're actually empowering a lot more people to actually participate in the power markets and the water markets and the waste markets of the future. So it's not just the sectoral driver, it's the market design driver that will create far more jobs than we've envisioned so far.
So that is inspiring. But so here is my follow-up question, which is, what would you see as the key sort of policy initiatives on part of the Government of India, but also on part of the markets, given that you mentioned them, which would, in a sense, be able to, really drive this agenda as we go forward?
I mean, there are certainly policy initiatives even within the green job space. The Skills Council on Green Jobs has been mentioned. There's the Surya Mitra, means Friends of the Sun program, etc., which trying to train 1 million people. But again, as was being described, curriculum is not just the board exams. Curriculum is the lifelong learning, and literally how do you retrain yourself? So, for instance, the Surya Mitra program modules were traditionally designed for solar PV installers and electrical engineers, etc. Now, as we are looking also not just at solar installation, but also solar manufacturing, we need to introduce new modules on solar manufacturing. But then, maybe 10 years from now, you'll have a very different solar panel, which will just be pasted on that window outside. That'll be a very different storyline. So I think there will be a limit to expecting how government can keep updating modules and programs and from the supply side, and expecting everyone else will just wait for government to do that. I think government is sending a clear signal that India is on a path to a green trajectory. We're going to be deploying, if we are 185,000 megawatts of non-fossil capacity today, we're going to have a 3x increase of that to 500,000 megawatts by 2030. So go figure, right? That's going to be, you can't just expect government to keep, announcing job schemes, or the market signal has already been delivered. So I think there's a huge importance that is needed in rapid training within industry, and as I said, in market design. So it's not just the solar installer, who's the jobs that haven't been created yet? Who is monitoring and managing a distributed energy grid that powers your electric vehicle, the electric public transport, that creates district cooling, that uses the electric vehicle as a battery charger, that then monitors when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, and then transfers the electrons? Someone else who creates the blockchain to actually do that trading in a closed loop, right? These are jobs that haven't been created. And it's all coming from not a single sectoral push, but an ecosystem that will evolve in townships, industrial places, etc., new cities that we'll build. So I think it will be a combination of government programs where the immediacy, the urgency will be responded to, but the importance that was being referred to comes from completely reimagining the markets of the future and the jobs that get derived from there.
That is extremely, extremely inspirational. So if I could go to you now, Zubaida. Again, there is of course the broad question, which is where do you see the big wave of sustainable jobs coming from India? And then, of course, given that you work with communities in the way that you do, how do you think we could, in a sense, empower social entrepreneurs, particularly women, to take part in this wave?
So I actually lead a large anti-poverty nonprofit globally. I'm a very traditional nonprofit leader, but really our vision is what guides us, which is let's put poverty in museums, right? Like, can we do that in our lifetimes? Yes, we can. How do we do that? We do that by transforming systems, and we do that by investing in the power of women, right? So the question of sustainability and jobs, I think it's better illustrated with a story. I remember being in India. So India is one of our offices, by the way. We have a few offices in Africa, Latin America as well, but India is one of our biggest offices. And I remember meeting this one particular entrepreneur. So we have entrepreneurship scouts. We work with informal women entrepreneurs. And our scouts go into communities and look for women entrepreneurs who are working in the informal economy. There's this particular woman who was selling clothes from home and making about 100 rupees, let's say $2 or $3 a month. We were able to dismantle gender bias in her home with her husband, with her mother-in-law, with her children, just making sure that she's valued when she steps out of the house. That's a core part, right? Like, you need male champions, you need families to support women. We then bought this woman out. The husband becomes the champion of her. She's now registered. Government of India has amazing schemes for these women. She's now registered. She files taxes. She got a loan through us to start a store. So now not only does she sell clothes, she has a bespoke tailoring unit attached to it. And 18 months into the program when I met her, she was struggling between 2 stores, had 4 employees. She was accepting digital payments, setting up a website, and talking to me about outsourced manufacturing, right? So think about sustainability. It comes from addressing the root cause of where poverty is coming from and how do we sustainably transform systems for them. So when we talk about this, we're talking about digitization, we're talking about technology integration, we're talking about financial inclusion, and we're talking about women coming at the forefront. Globally, the numbers are different, but at least in India, we have a roaring 700 million young people who are looking for jobs. Are we going to give them all jobs? Absolutely not. Are we going to make them all entrepreneurs? Absolutely not. But how are we going to enable them to be successful in an economy that not only helps them, but others around them, right? So that's kind of how we look at it. So gender is a core part of what we do, but addressing gender allows us to bring families out of poverty in a way that they never slide back. So 3 things we measure ourselves against from a sustainability perspective is 1, any intervention that we do, is it increasing the income of the family? We don't leave the men behind, we don't leave the woman behind, but is it increasing the income of the family? 2, are we increasing the agency, specifically of the woman, in terms of having a voice in what happens with the money that comes inside the household? Is there a savings? Is there access to capital? What kind of loan should the family take? Should they take a loan to buy a refrigerator? Vis-a-vis, should they take a loan to expand their business and buy a refrigerator with the profits that come with it, right? And the third part of it is resilience, which is where climate comes in, is to make sure that we are enabling this family to have multiple sources of income and thinking about the kind of debt that they should be accessing to help them economically grow economically grow their families in their lifetimes. The last piece of it is we're always co-creating, and a huge part of what we are hearing from the last mile, especially the young people, is AI. Is it a buzzword? Yes, it is. But what is it? What is AI? Does it mean that we're training chatbots for them? Does it mean that they are integrating with some device? No, they really want to understand what it means. So Grameen has actually, as of last week, maybe even this week, we announced a consortium with Technovation, which has an AI curriculum, which is not a curriculum that you just give them, but it's a curriculum that enables them to understand, create their own models, create their own data sets, and analyze their own data sets. It's a 12-week program. We partnered with UNICEF, where we have access to a lot of young people globally because we are global. And Grameen is the last mile trainer and enabler of taking this technology in a way that these young people can develop a skill set that not only allows them to either become an entrepreneur, but on the other side, if they want to be a part of the economy and be a part of the workforce, they can. So they always have two options all the time. So when we think about sustainability, we think about co-creating at the last mile. We think about dismantling gender biases. And we do that by creating male champions. And most of all, we ensure that financial inclusion is happening. And we ride the wave of digitization because that's how we reach scale and sustainability.
So if I can ask a follow-up question to that. Women, as you mentioned, face particular challenges when the question of sustainability is raised, whether it's resilience in the face of climate change, because if you look at the kind of jobs women do, whether it's in agriculture, etc., they are all, in a sense, facing the brunt of the problem. And you hinted at others, which are differential access to capital, to technology, to education. So what particular role, A, do you see women playing in this? And B, what are the particular challenges you think where gender really intersects with the looming crisis, with the looming sort of climate problem, to create specific problems that you think that women are facing? Got
it. So you got me started there. I can go on for hours, but I'll try to keep it for a minute or two. So we work at the intersection of gender, financial inclusion, and climate, right? And when we say that, it's really because we believe that we know that women are invisible, right? A lot of the work that they do is invisible. A lot of it is not monetized. A lot of it you can never pay for in your lifetimes. We are not saying that that needs to be monetized. We are saying that needs to be recognized and at the table. Right? So when we talk about, I said this yesterday in the panel as well, we met a particular woman who was like, I was married for 15 years. My husband did not bother to ask for my name or know my name until I became an agent and I started bringing money into the household with the extra 4 hours of time that I had. That's all I had, right, after taking care of everybody. So women having the economic power actually gives them value to make decisions for the family in a very meaningful way. So our job is to bring women from the invisibility phase to the visibility phase by getting them the access to the capital and giving them the skills. But most importantly, when I go back to the household dialogue piece, it's like, we are not saying men are bad, that they don't recognize the value of women. We are saying that nobody has ever spoken to them about it. And here we are bringing waves of women into the workforce and not making sure that they are going back into the same cultural black hole that they cannot get themselves out of, right? We did this survey that came out where a lot of women who were working in the banking sector found it very hard because they had to have that 9 to 5 and then it took them a few hours to close off. And so they were finding it very difficult to stay in the workforce. So we did a survey asking, well, what will make it better for you, right? Like, what is the one incentive that we can help you? And they said, we are willing to work extra, but when we go home, we want meal for the family at the table. Can you just order food and we'll work an extra 3 hours, because when we go home, we just want to eat. We want to make sure everybody eats. That's a very small financial intervention to allow women to stay in the workforce. It's like 50 rupees a day if you do it in mass and if you order in bulk, right? So the solutions are very simple to keep women in the workforce sustainably. And when you keep women in the workforce sustainably, you're addressing the climate issue in a very deep-rooted way, and you're addressing the sustainability of the income and the family, walking out of poverty in a very meaningful way as well.
Exceptional. Now, if I could just go across to Hakon. Of course, there is the the broad question that I've really thrown up for everyone, which is, where do you see the next big wave of sustainable jobs coming from in India? But also, given your background, I wanted to ask you, how you think India could better integrate into, the sort of global renewable energy market, and what there is that India can learn from, the European models, which you are very much embedded in.
Thank you. Very good and broad question indeed. If I could, carry on from Grameen, we see that in the renewable energy sector. If you look the latest IRENA report shows that 40% of all jobs within solar are held by women, and within the renewable sector there's a higher percentage of women active in this part. And for India's part, and globally, all jobs in the future will have to be sustainable, because they will not be defined as jobs. They will be something that is obstructing our future. So we need to shift this whole mindset, because there's a cost of not having sustainable economics, use of resources, jobs, everything. And therefore, it's very important that we have a shift towards more renewable energy as a driving force in India, globally. But India is a leading part in this in many ways, and definitely will be in the future. As Dr. Ghosh mentioned, you had a number of very valid, good points here, and stole a couple of mine, must be said. But these are super important, because if you look at India, 7% of all new renewable jobs are created in India in 2022. I'm sure they increase that number and percentage and number in 2023 and in the time to come. And by doing so, you have access to renewable energy, which by definition have a lower marginal cost if you price it in a spot market, which gives it easier access to electricity more places, which means that children can read, they can go to school, they can do their homework. In your country, in India, sun sets at 6 o'clock roughly. In mine, sometimes it doesn't set, in some months it sets early. Mm-hmm. But in your case, you need to do homework after 6 o'clock, you need light. You need to have safety in order to go to roads. You need to have a factory, you need to have electricity. Back in the day, it was said that there was a belt around the equator where you said, around this belt, 20 degrees north or south, there will be no industry, there will be no progress, because it will be too warm. Hey, we have air conditioner. If India could invent an air conditioner that didn't also have greenhouse gas emissions, you revolutionize the world. Mm-hmm. So, and definitely when it comes to the curriculum and actually using AI so that you don't have to use 90% of your Indian brain power to come up with solutions, we have to work together and we have to compete, which is good for us because that brings out the best of us and the worst as well. But we need to have competition, and by that we can use the whole, the global brain power to find solutions. And AI can help us not doing the repetitive parts where you have to learn stuff, but where we can be creative and constructive and find solutions. And I think this is super important. And the lessons we've learned in Europe is that, okay, you need security of supply. India cannot afford to have turned the lights off. In 2012, you had a shock where 600 million people lost their electricity. You never go back to that. I do not blame you for using coal or whatever hydrocarbons you have available to power your society. It's needed. But in the future, you will realize that this is destroying a lot of Indian lives, human lives, not just because of greenhouse gas emissions, but locally. What is it, 700,000 people dying because of air pollution in India? This is a tremendous loss of Indian brain power and human lives. By having more renewable energy in there, maintaining security of supply, you can power new industries, new innovations, and we're not sure what's going to come, but it'll be a new and better and brighter future. And having this, we do this in Europe as well, but we try. And I like to say that there is no such thing as a developed country. We're all being developed, but we're working towards the same goals. And I think a cooperation between at least democracies will help us definitely, sharing ideas, sharing capital, sharing know-how, will definitely bring a lot of sustainable jobs in the future. Because alone, we die alone, but together we can walk, you know, we can sustain our future.
No, so if if I can again take move forward from that, which is, and I'd like to put this question both to Sri Balmuruganji and to you and to Dr. Ghosh particularly, which is how can partnerships, particularly say here we have a very diverse group of people, and here we have a wide perspective that we're putting through. How can these perspectives be brought together? How can we, for example, bring public-private partnerships in? How can we bring international partnerships in? What role do you see both for that, and how can these partnerships be encouraged by India? So, if you would like to go
Well,
first.
I think the main World Economic Forum this year was trust.
Yes.
Building trust is not done, and it's easy to destroy. We know that for a fact, right? But to build it takes a long time. So you need to have start with meetings like this, and this is something that I can't take away from us. This is one of the reasons why I think these kind of forums will have to exist, because we need to meet, we need to greet, we need to have a cocktail in the evenings and a little bit of chai in the mornings. We need to talk and change ideas. This is super important, the human connections. It means that also people are not dangerous. You know, we're all the same, really. We're just advanced maps, really, at the end of it. But we can do extraordinary stuff. And building trust, I mean, I've had the honor of hosting a lot of top heavy, also from government level, but from power sector in India to the Nordics, and to share our experience on how we have electrified. We've come from a country, I come from a country that got its independence in 1905, and for half a millennia, our decisions were made in our neighboring capital, you know. And I'm the first generation in my family that didn't have to suffer, war. So we all have our background or history, and I think working together, building trust over time, it helps. And it just needs to take time, but we need to make the effort to reach out a hand and actually show up, be present, and share. And having this delegation to Norway, where we then cross Norway and we go to the fjords and we see the western forts, but we only travel with electricity. And I show you, okay, this is an electrical bus, an electrical train, electrical ferry. Some of this infrastructure is just brand new. It was built last week. So I have to hope that it works, right? But this is showing, it's like seeing is believing. And then they meet local engineers. And since half of all Indians are engineers, they love meeting other engineers. They have
If I can just, because we're on like quite a tight schedule, and just put that question to Sri Balmuruganji. So how do you see public-private partnerships and these sort of wide perspectives being leveraged together, to be brought together for the future?
It's not only in sustainable jobs. Partnerships are always very important to have meaningful results. Everywhere, anywhere, without partnerships, you can't proceed. You can't see success. So that's where partnerships are very, very important. To give again one example how we need to have partnerships. Fellow panelist was giving an example of waste management. Again, I need to give this example how jobs are being created, how the issue of circular economy is also being addressed, how environment safeguards are being ensured. Swachh Bharat Mission, you must be knowing, this Swachh Bharat Mission Part 2, where solid and liquid waste management is a very, very important component. Wherein one simple example of our plastic waste which is generated at village level. This particular mission is having both rural and urban component. In urban area, normally you see there's an ecosystem where there are players who come and collect waste, and then it is established, though there are a lot of work is to be done. In rural area, it is normally non-existing. So there, government is playing a role, and then you need to find good private partners to to make it successful. How it is done? Government is putting its investment and creating infrastructure, collecting waste. In each and every panchayat in India right now is having a waste processing unit. Again, it is creating job also, again, sustainable jobs. So we are training, and then the waste is getting collected. It's not a full-time job. It is giving some meaningful income, and also ensuring that villages are kept clean. The villages where we, again, SHG women are selected, they are trained, and then this waste is getting collected, and then it is brought to a place in a particular place where it is processed. From there, you need to have partners where we are having private players to collect those waste and then get it processed. This is one example I wanted to elaborate. And then, as I said, in every sphere, you need to have partners. Particularly, again, I would like to mention about technology transfer, where you need to have stronger partnership with private players, because, again, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and there are countries who are having excellent technologies related to all areas where this technology transfer is also extremely important. This kind of partnership is also going to be very crucial to succeed in our endeavors. I stop here and
Sure. So before we, go to the audience, I'll just go to Yashraj for closing remarks to our panel.
So, thank you. Today, my name is Yashraj Akashi. I represent the PhD Commerce and the New Age Industry Committee. But let me tell you one big point. One of the reasons why we've held these conversations is because I believe the New Age India and the New Age Indians are shaping technology, shaping industry in a much sustainable way than their parents or their last generation is. We represent 150,000 companies spread across 80, 90 different industries, probably even more. And I can tell you, the next generation of this industry first thinks sustainable. And these are individuals across the country. The more and more I meet them, the first thing they say is, I will not do my father's business because it's not sustainable. And it's not just sustainable because it's not about the capital, it's not about the profit. It's the way of doing it is wrong. And we've seen so many new age industries change. We've seen people get up and say, we should have more women working in the workforce. I've personally seen a case of a wife fight with a husband in a large company saying, we just have 2% women, what are we doing about it? And every year that number increased. That's the power of New Age India. Now let me tell you, we have the same problems of poverty, population, and pollution. Okay, but on the other side, we have potential. I truly believe if India has to set the way forward for the world on sustainable jobs, we will set the numbers right. And it's across the country. If you've heard of Seva, or if you've heard of Mandeshi Bank, or many other such small enterprises that have grown big in this sphere. I mean, Chetna Gala Sinha is an inspiration. Rima Ben Nanavati is an inspiration. These are people who are leading workforces of women changing the way forward. And they first think sustainable. And to leave you with a remark, when I had done an induction with NRLM in, I think, 2013, long ago, you know, the first thing someone told me in a hamlet outside Bodh Gaya is, मर्द को पैसा मिलता है दारू पीता है, मुझे मिलता है तो मैं उसके लिए खाना बनाती हूँ. You know, women are so important in this. They think different, they think sustainable, they think family, and they will never ever do anything to erode the chance for a better livelihood for their family. So I think it's a complete circle where we have more and more youngsters, women coming into the workforce. The way of doing work, the way they end up putting things across is also going to change. And I think India has miles to go, but it will, with its sheer number and its potential, set a benchmark for the world. So I think this panel is representative of that. Each one of you guys is an individual from a diverse stream, and I feel, each one of us will agree that the potential for India is immense, and what better place to discuss this than Davos. So thank you all for being here.
So we have 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah, we could open it up.
So if...
Thank you to all the panelists. It's been really an enriching discussion that we had till now on the sustainability going ahead. So my question to Anab, how can the industry utilize AI that's really being developing now to understand the changes that the industry need to make in order to understand the job requirement while we go ahead in the sustainable area?
Sure, we could collect the questions as well. The gentleman here, if you could. Yeah.
Hi, Peter from Finland. I spent most of my time in the Equality Lounge here at Davos, and it's been very inspiring. So I suggest going over there if you have some free time. Now that you have empowered women in the family and the local, close local society, Do you have any plans on empowering women for leadership? Because there's a lot of research that shows that women leaders at governmental level creates peace, creates prosperity. So the same that you do for families, you do for countries and society.
Sure. And if we could just have one question from the gentleman there.
Thank you, everyone. Great panel discussion. My name is Marco Montefiore. My background is 20 years in energy trading, shifted into technology investments. And the question for you is about energy literacy. There's, in my opinion, I'm writing a book about that. I'm interested to hear your opinion. Energy literacy is the biggest enabler of both decarbonization and digitalization, because they're both closely connected. AI takes a lot of energy all the way across the value chain, from the manufacturing of microprocessors to data storage to data manipulation. And it's required for energy transition, which is a leap of faith, because we don't know exactly what it actually is, but it requires data collection, more sensors, and data manipulation.
Right.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Ghosh, if
We should stop with
Yeah.
three and then maybe take
yeah. So, if Dr. Ghosh, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, maybe I'll try to answer the first and the third question. So, you know, the applications of AI, I think we're at a very early stage of figuring out all the applications that's possible. But let's look at how can we give a leg up, right? So, a couple of examples. One is the bulk of Indian industrial base is actually small, medium enterprises. And that's actually the case across the developing world. That's the backbone of our industrial base, right? Small, medium enterprises are often located in clusters. So when you are thinking about the way in which you're optimizing for manufacturing, if you go and tell them decarbonize overnight and you'll still have the same working capital problem, you'll still have the high interest rates that you have to pay, they're not going to do it, right? But what is the process optimization that you can do for energy use, water use, waste heat recovery, just the way in which materials are moving, the reprocessing, the circular economy? We now have a framework coming out in India on the circular economy. We estimate that alone can be a $2 trillion market for India over the next few decades. When you start thinking about the nature in which these inefficiencies exist, then where does AI come in? It comes in from the better predictive analytics that you can bring in terms of understanding, look, for the last 6 months, this is the way your machines have been running. And this is the inefficiency that it's delivering, whether it's an energy use optimization or something else. And this is how it could improve. Or this is how your machine on your shop floor could sync up the waste heat from there, could sync up and create a market for selling that waste heat to the next guy in that same cluster. So the point I'm trying to make here is, it's actually about process optimization rather than AI as a separate thing. And back to the energy literacy point, you're absolutely right. Over the next 2 or 3 years, India is in the process of deploying nearly 300 million smart meters across households. And my organization, CEW, is the knowledge partner to the government to understand how do consumers engage with this new thing that's getting attached to their households. The point is not the hardware. The point is actually the consumer interface with the information that will provide. At the most basic level, bidirectional trading of energy. If you generate energy, you feed it back in the grid, or you introduce time of day pricing. So you are running your appliances or whatever it is when you get the lowest cost energy, say, coming from the sun. But as you get better and better at understanding your own footprint, you become more conscious of the kind of appliances you're purchasing, or how you're optimizing their use, or how, again, using AI that it syncs up with something else happening somewhere else. Your neighbor's, two-wheeler charging becomes your battery for, running an appliance at home. So I think just one last thought. I mean, the word technology is often reduced down to tech. But actually, if you go back to Greek, the tech part is not the science. It's the art and the skill of applying the logia. The logic is the science. The tech part is the art and the application. That's what we got to focus on. The same solar boat that's taking me around the fjords can be a solar boat for Kerala fishermen to take fish. The technology is the same, the application is different. Start focusing on application end users and the opportunities arise.
Sorry, and Zubaida, if you'd like to now address the.
Sure. So a lot of our work is in developing leadership, but again, it's going to be a long road to take a last mile woman to a political entry point, even in her own village. A lot of what we are doing is integration of farmer producer organizations and women into them. And we've had success with 3 farmer producer organizations having 1 board member each, which is a woman, which primarily have been over the last decade male-led organizations. We do see, and we have to be aware of our shortcomings, which is most often than not, the chairman's wife is the only board member. That's not what we want to see. But 2 out of the 3, one of them is the chairman's wife, but the other 2, we've brought some young women into the workforce leaders. So women are able to more engage, they know where to go ask questions. So leadership is something that we are integrating into our systems transformation. Will that have a pathway to local political leadership? Definitely yes. But the first step is to dismantle gender and get them into roles that they traditionally have not been, so that they can become future leaders of tomorrow.
Just
like
a
to
second.
add, since I know, as I mentioned, I had a privilege, I would say, it's not an opportunity, but a privilege to work with the self-help group program for almost 7 long years. So she mentioned it's very difficult job, but since if you work for a particular period, I would not say even a decade is a longer period, because there are arguments. We can talk about SSG program for 2 hours, 3 hours. Argument is we have already done enough amount of capacity building and then mobilization, all those things, but I would not agree. Even with this 10 years of work, where I worked, this in political participation, they are doing great, because this the kind of opportunity they get to hone their leadership skills, and then they are natural leaders. Again, I would definitely say that they are natural leaders. They are becoming village heads. There are cases we would actually normally in a program we used to track how many of them are becoming village heads, how many of them are becoming next level, and there are women who are reaching a particular stage, they can influence elections. No more, the political system in that particular place cannot ignore their influence. They become a big I would say pressure group, that is a kind of, and then they are also becoming leaders. And her example of not only one board, one board member, there are so many producer companies where all of them are women members. The entire governance of that producer company and all those organizations, there are so many other organizations where all these, the governance part is taken care by women, that is helping them to hone their leadership skills. I would like to give one example. Within 3-4 years, one producer company which is headed by all women, rural women, could able to manage transaction, their turnover worth $25 million. They're all from rural area, of course. Spear.
Yes,
Yeah,
Pranav,
quick
please.
to answer your first, AI can help solve some of this. I think the role of fundamental research still doesn't go away, right, with generative AI. Like, for example, generative AI has not found cures for all our cancers or for all the problems of energy. So I think there will be this creativity, there will be this role of fundamental research. What generative AI may help is sort of on the simulation, on getting there faster, short-circuiting. Like Satya Nadella talked about how through generative AI, they were able to find a solution to a battery that has 70% less lithium. Right? But it does still require science and perhaps a human and fundamental research to find a substitute to lithium or to get it to 5% instead of 30%. So I think we shouldn't, in this generative AI wave, get rid of all the last 200 years of work on fundamental research on materials, on sort of industrial, educational, any of those pieces, on energy, right? And because at the heart of it, we're not creating or destroying energy, we're just transforming from one to another. So I think that's the focus that should still remain in the human domain. And then each human researcher can use generative AI to fast forward the cycles of deployment, measurement, iteration, things of that nature.
Yeah. Sure. And so last remarks from
Lovely, thank you, Kathman. Very good. I think I already touched upon on bringing women into the industry and as leaders as well. I think that's a part of the success in the Nordics, where we do have a lot of smart meters and where we automatically can use our smartphones. And often the small phone is smarter than its owner, right? But in this case, you can use your smartphone to ensure that you're using electricity when the prices are cheap, which means that there's an abundance of renewable energy. And then you turn off your heating in your house, or you don't charge your EV at home anymore because the prices are high. And that's when we import